beautiful golden galactic celestial pod on the planet, human family, in the miraculous ascension process. We bliss here to do a little love stream on understanding the releasing of the ego, the process that is underway on the planet for the Western world. So we love we so much, and for We Bliss, this is a special day because in April of 2015, on this day, a group of us were doing a grid journey in Egypt, and maybe I'll share more about that on another love stream and what happened on this day in 2015 in Egypt. Essentially, part of our work was to bring the age of Pisces to an end through a special mission in the Great Pyramid. Oh my gosh, there's so many hummingbirds flying around since I started this love stream. They're like little messengers. So yes, on the 5th of April 2015 was the day that we did a special mission in the Great Pyramid to bring the age of Pisces to an end through the grids. So we'll talk a little bit about working the grids. For those who have been grid workers on the planet, one of the things that we have done is literally go to transfigurative locations on the planet and shift the energy such that new ley lines of consciousness can open up to the collective. So it's kind of like irrigation in farming fields, big farming fields. Grid workers are guided by a higher divine plan to go to certain places and close down certain streams of energy, streams of consciousness, and open up new streams of consciousness by working with the grids. And that was a large part of my role for over a decade. So this was a very special day. And I think I'll do a different love stream maybe this evening to just share what happened at the Great Pyramid on this day. For now, this love stream is really about understanding the process of the dissolution of the ego and what is happening, so that we know how to integrate the process so that it can be enjoyable, it can be easeful. And that's part of what this transmission does, is assist people to understand step by meticulous step what is happening within, so that we can continually align with the process. So many humans on the planet will use metaphors. Take what resonates, throw the rest away. And if you think this love stream is inspiring, please share it with that little share button right now so we can be live on other streams. That's called gifting. Okay, take what resonates, throw the rest away. A lot of humans on the planet have been inside of something called two-strand DNA. And we would invite the possibility that two-strand DNA is bits and bytes of data, ones and zeros, which means that it was an implemented AI consciousness into the physical form. And many of the root peoples on the planet, the true indigenous people who have a harmonious unity consciousness balance with nature and with the planet, have never been inside of this consciousness. So we could almost say that the consciousness of duality is like a foreign consciousness that came to the planet. And so for those of us who are unplugging from the dualistic consciousness, we often share this great book. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out, by Richard Rudd, It's a great book that he wrote called The Gene Keys. And it allows people, you can go to the Gene Keys website to discover what your implemented AI consciousness is. This isn't how Richard describes the Gene Keys, but we're putting this forth in a way to invite, to invoke contemplation of what we are unlocking from. So you can go to the Gene Keys website and you put in your birth information and you can discover the role in the play that you've been playing. And then you can come to this great book and you can read about the different genetic sequences that have been activated in your personality blueprint. And when you do, what the book does is it assists one's consciousness to begin to step back from identification with our personality. So when we start to get a little bit of separation, a little bit of distance from believing that we are our personality, we have more spaciousness to begin to perceive something greater than our lives, our stories, and our personalities. And so that is really what is happening on a collective level, step by meticulous step through the divine plan, to allow each one of us to unlock and unravel our consciousness from the personality itself and bring our pure source consciousness back into these body vehicles. So it's like a purification process going on, a purification from our egos. And one of the things I was guided to share today is just to understand that the ego mechanism susses everything up in its perception, and it looks to see if something is friend or foe. The ego, like we say, is like running on bits and bytes of data. So as the ego is sourcing things out, it's trying to decide strategically everything around it. Will it serve it or will it take away from it? And so as we understand these principles of the ego, or these concepts of the ego, we can begin to make a greater observation about what is controlling our awareness so that we can unlock and unplug ourselves from it. So the ego has strategy. That's how the ego operates, is through strategy, strategizing. Will this work for me? Will this serve me? And unity consciousness is something greater. Unity consciousness is a consciousness that comes in that does not run the mainframe computer in a way that is pondering how the self will be served. Unity consciousness is a greater consciousness that comes in to the form, that begins to guide the form from a consciousness that holds all equal. It serves all equal. And this is why today, on this miraculous day in 2015, we were sent into the Great Pyramid to bring to an end the age of Pisces. Because the age of Pisces, from how we experienced it, the age of Pisces was really about the Christos consciousness, going into the depths and rising our consciousness up to our spirituality again. That's what these alignments in astrology right now are really about. The age of Pisces that many in the Western world experienced was very different. What we perceive the age of Pisces to have been is age that has been pyramidal and patriarchal, and has left out the heart, left out the feminine, left out the spiritual consciousness. So this great transition we are in right now is the rising ourselves up from identification with the ego and identification with the material. It doesn't mean we are dissing the material or leaving the material realms behind. We're just bringing our consciousness back into a balanced alignment with the external physical and the internal spiritual. So if you think this love stream is inspiring, please share it with a little share button down there right now. That's called gifting. So it's a purification process from the mechanism, the egoic mechanism from within our form. And it can feel disorienting because humans weren't really prepared for what was to come, even though the prophecy keepers told us what was coming. So now we're in this state of experiencing a grand purification, and we are coming back to a place of getting to know the purity of our spiritual consciousness again. So just a few things so that we can navigate inside of ourselves so that our awareness can begin to identify what is ego. And again, thank you, Mr. Rudd, for the Gene Keys. For those who haven't heard it yet, you can go to the Gene Keys website, print off your blueprint so that you can get a better sense of what is the ego, what is the personality mechanism that the consciousness is peering through and possibly identifying with. It's like the metaphor we often use is, you know, the big muscle guy on the beach who has the hot rod car, who thinks he's his car. He identifies with his car so much that he thinks he's his car. What happens to that guy when his car is taken away? The same thing is the same thing is happening on the planet right now. Is the car that the Western world has identified with as personality is literally being taken away. It's being dissolved away. And so the way that we can navigate this within us is to have the capacity for the awareness to recognize what is ego. And that's why, again, it's very helpful. Okay. So as we're doing this personal navigation inside of ourselves, we can begin to see the subtle mechanisms of the ego. Anything that is going through our awareness that is using strategy or strategizing, like a chess game, that is ego. So the fictional fiction that we are dissolving ourselves from was literally, as Wee's great friend Shane Shima says, a fifth dimensional game on a 3D chessboard. And that is dissolving away. So at the end of this age of Pisces kind of day, because like we say, in 2015, as a grid worker, we brought the codes into the Great Pyramid to dissolve it. Because Egypt and all the structures there are a false overlay of the true holographic libraries of Lyra. And we can go into that in more depth in another transmission. We're just here to say that Egypt is a false overlay. Take what resonates, throw the rest away. Step by meticulous step, we share these pieces for contemplation. So on the 5th of April 2015, we were sent in the Great Pyramid in Egypt to do some grid work to dissolve the false overlay from the true holographic libraries of Lyra. And that is literally saying we're dissolving the stage away. And we got confirmation 2 years later, because on that day, which we'll talk about more in another love stream, the guidance, we actually made a post on that day and said, today we bring the age of Pisces to an end, and if we're successful, we will know 2 years from now on Wesak, which was the 10th of May 2017, and we know that we were successful because the Schumann resonance took a quantum leap, a cosmic leap, to 130 hertz on that day. Anyways, let's go back to this piece about recognizing the egoic mechanisms within us, so that we can all, because all humans, the entire playing field is now equal, especially on this day. Up until this day, step by meticulous step, we have been dissolving structures on other levels that created an unequal playing field. But the playing field is now equal, and the playing field, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, is the unlocking of one's consciousness from the ego. That's why the rules, the game, is the same for every human on the planet. And if this love stream is inspiring, please share it. That's called gifting. So the playing field is equal now for all beings on the planet. And this transmission helps us to understand mechanisms of the ego so that we no longer identify with it. So back to this piece about purifying from the ego. The ego strategizes. So if our awareness is aware that there is strategy going on inside of us, then we know that our pure source consciousness is bound to an egoic mechanism, an egoic structure within us. And we have a choice. We have a choice to use our tools to connect in. And we share many of those tools all the time in all these love streams. There's a whole bunch of love streams down there for anyone who's interested to follow all these love streams along right now about the mitochondrial DNA and the unlocking from the two-strand DNA. We have placed meditations down there, all kinds of things to help. And so if we have the awareness that we are focused on strategy, where our consciousness is still in the chess game. And that chess game was the lower reflection of the age of Pisces. The age of Pisces was not meant to be about the material world, but for those whose consciousness got steered off the path by being very engrossed in the ego, it became about the material game. As we come to this end of the age of Pisces, we discover that if we remained engrossed in the material game, in the competition game, and the game of strategy to own the most things in the physical, we will discover right now that we are very far off the path of the true purpose of the age of Pisces. The age of Pisces was to dive down into the underworld, to reclaim all of the fragmented aspects of the self, to nurture them back within us through love, to rise back up into the spiritual, and that is the Christos and beyond. So for those who have been doing the internal work to balance the polarities and nurture the shadow aspects of the self back, we are now at the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, because we now have the capacity to make the cosmic connection again with our overself and our pure source consciousness, and to bring that into form, which is the unlocking of the true superabundance. So again, to know within ourselves, because it is the responsibility of each one of us to learn to dissolve the ego through choice, because where we place our focus, where we give our energy, empowers that. So once we understand the mechanisms of the ego, we begin to make choices to go, no, I'm not going to serve the ones and zeros, the bits and bytes of data called artificial intelligence, called the ego. I'm going to make a choice to use all of my capacities, all of my tools, to draw my pure source consciousness into my form, to override the vibrational emanations of the ego. And that's the purification process from within, is our capacity to draw that pure source consciousness in. And that's why we did a transmission the other Miracle Day called Grounding It In. It was about sitting in the center of our seed, which is this magnificent throne called our body, called our temple. So we are learning to really hold our presence, our pure, neutral, coherent presence in the physical form. And as we do, we are now accessing that cosmic pure source potential. And it is beginning to alchemize the form. And it has required immense physical, spiritual, mental, emotional alchemy to get to this place in the form where we can hold this state in the form. So for anyone on the path, we just encourage the understanding that this is a step by meticulous step process, and to keep going. We've shared this before. Keep going. Stay on the path. We didn't get taught these mechanics in school, because in the fictional fiction there was a lot of things in place to distract the consciousness from preparation for these miracles to unlock our true superabundance. Because the fictional fiction called the Matrix created a middle structure between us and Source. And so we've had to find our way back individually by going inward, by learning to love ourselves beyond guilt, beyond shame, beyond denial, beyond rejection, beyond separation, beyond suppression. We've had to learn to find love again. And what we say love is coherence. Coherence is the shortcut to everything. Our capacity to just find that stillness, that coherence, that 0 point within, that peaceful place, that collapses all of the waves back into neutral, back into zero. And from that place, so this is like building a muscle, to learn how to hold this coherent place in what we perceive as chaos. So coherence is a practice of unifying both hemispheres of the brain back into one. And we often share how to do that. The simplest way: cross your wrists, clasp your hands, cross your ankles, close your eyes, deep breathe until you feel a shift. When you do, come out, hold your fingertips together. Keep your eyes open and bring yourself back into the physical. Simplest way to claim your seat in your throne, your seat inside of your seat, because these physical bodies, inside of them is the mystical capacity to go supernatural, and what is called multidimensional. We don't really like that expression, multidimensional, because it's more about becoming whole again, so that we are both physical and non-physical simultaneously. That is the unlocking of our pure potential in the form. So again, let's go back to just talk about tracking the ego. Tracking the ego is a process about becoming very, very honest with ourselves, to really begin to observe our motives and our inspirations. What inspires us? And if this love stream is inspiring, please share it right now so that it can go live on other channels. What inspires us? What invokes us to move forward? And so if there is a strategy to it, that is ego. And the thing to know is that nowadays the chessboard is dissolving away. So for any facet of our consciousness that is still relying on our ego to get us by, there's less and less capacity and influence through the ego. And that's why we say that for those aspects of ourself that have still been relying on the ego for so long, through force, to force agendas, through strategy and manipulation, that force, some people call it power, we call it force, that force and its capacity to influence is dissolving away. And as it dissolves away, as the Hopi prophecy said, there was a purpose to the container that we were in. There was a purpose to the experiment that we were in. To resolve our miscreations from our misunderstandings of cosmic principles. Many of the root people or the indigenous people on the planet have remained in unity consciousness, and they have held the field for this process of purification of all the bloodlines, of all of the star codes to be returned from infraction, from corruption in the bloodlines. So many indigenous people on the planet have held the field in unity consciousness for this experiment, for this play to be played out, to clear the bloodlines from the inside out by embodying inside of a dualistic experiment. And then each of us has embodied inside of different lineages and different bloodlines, and our role was to purify from the inside out, to keep drawing more and more of that spiritual energy through the bloodlines, through the ley lines, through the imprints of beliefs that were imprinted in the consciousness. And so the way we've done it is by learning to hold coherence, learning to hold neutrality while those patterns are dissolved or cleared out. And as we hold coherence inside of ourselves and we clear those patterns out of ourselves, then we clear it out of our family, we cleared out of our bloodlines, our lineages, all the way back to source, which is why the process for many people has felt way too long, because it's had levels and layers of clearing that have had to occur by starting with ourselves and then opening to serve something greater than ourselves, which is our ancestries, our bloodlines, and our lineages. Many of us have now done that work on the planet, and because we have done it, we've collapsed the chessboard. that the fractional phantom aspect of the self used it for serving itself in a pyramidal way to dominate all life through the realms of the material. And that is done. Official on this day that in 2015 we took a very special sacred crystal orb from the island of Kauai into the Great Pyramid to dissolve that out, that force and control that was being played out through certain structures on the planet to influence all human consciousness. And so on this day, we are in celebration that we dissolved the chessboard. We dissolved away that game of domination that played out through the age of Pisces. And as we say, the chessboard, as it's dissolved away, the playing field is equal again. It's equal that we said the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is one's capacity to unlock oneself from the ego. And that's an equal playing field where all can play through the choice of our decisions every day, every miracle, every moment of every day. Do we give service to the ego, or are we choosing an energy to just hold still while the manipulative strategies of the ego dissolve away by just choosing coherence rather than serving manipulation and strategy through the ego construct? And as we do, all ego constructs dissolve away, and we discover we are already here together in the heavens. We are already here together in the garden. And this dissolves all borders, all boundaries, all taxes, all passports, all concepts of separation. So each one of us, as we continue to experience the dissolution as agendas that were created by the ego, continue to dissolve and fall apart. Anything that was created by the ego is falling apart. So if one is invested in those agendas, they will continue to be disappointed. They will continue to discover all those agendas dissolve apart because they are not sustainable. The creative force of the feminine is returning to all, the creative power. The creational power is returning to us all. And as that creational power returns, that is what ignites what is called eternal life. I don't like the word eternal, but that life returns to the physical form. Everything created by the ego is an agenda, and it is non-sustainable by the true creational energy that comes into us as we consciously participate in the dissolution of the ego. So, probably going to share some more love streams on this miracle day. That feels good for now. We're going to go back to do some more painting. It's a purification process. It is equal for all. These transmissions are here to articulate in a way that each one of we can have our epiphanies to understand what is happening from within. Purification from the ego. We love we thank we. If this love stream is inspiring, please share it. That's called gifting. I put many, many links from all these love streams, step by meticulous step, that are coming through right now to help all of us understand the process that's happening. So check those other love streams. Lots of meditations that we've recorded over Miracles in Time. Every single one of them is profound. I posted a meditation that was recorded from the Stupa of Enlightenment in Crestone, Colorado, which isn't real and doesn't exist because names of places that divide up the garden just turn this magnificent living library into a monopoly board, and the garden is not a monopoly board anymore. But it was the meditation that I put in the notes from 4/4/20 was recorded. I think we started that meditation at 9:11 p.m. on 4/4/20 at the Stupa of Enlightenment under the stars. So check out that meditation. Please subscribe to the Unity Transmissions YouTube channel. When we get to 1,000 subscribers, we can go live with live streams from YouTube. And so please do that. I put the link in the description box. And there's also, if you want to contribute to these love streams through PayPal or through a GoFundMe that the pod created, you can do that as well. And yeah, just like, subscribe, check me out on TikTok. It's Bliss Love Creations on TikTok, or Unity Grace Bliss on TikTok. Instagram, we're doing some cool little creations there for activation. The activations from these transmissions come in the space between the words, direct from the divine. So let's all celebrate transcendence of time and gravity, those two conditions of the ego. We are setting ourselves free. It's called liberty. We love we. See we in the miracle. Aloha.